It's 6 p.m. on Wednesday here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Hwang Ji-hye. And these are the top stories we're following at this hour. Countering recent North Korean threats is the focal point of high-level South Korea-U.S. defense talks that kick off in Seoul. And on the first day of his state visit to the U.S., China's president seeks to reassure American business leaders about its economy and how it will cooperate in the fight against cybercrime. Plus, South Korea's military is set to install 200 thermal surveillance cameras in the demilitarized zone. With wide speculation that North Korea will conduct some form of provocation next month to mark a key anniversary, deterring and countering the threats topped the South Korea-U.S. defense talks on Wednesday. Our Connie Kim has more.
Discussing efforts to shore up the South Korea-U.S. military alliance and ways to counter North Korea's nuclear missile threats topped the annual senior-level defense dialogue on Wednesday. Seoul's Deputy Minister for Policy at the Defense Ministry, Yoo Jeh-seung, led the South Korean delegation at the Korea-U.S. Integrated Defense Dialogue. The U.S. was represented by Abraham Denmark, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia, and Elaine Bunn, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear and Missile Defense Policy. Stressing that strengthening combined defense readiness is a purpose of the defense talks, Yoo said deterring North Korean threats is the most important issue.
With North Korea's nuclear and missile threats on the rise, building up the South Korea-U.S. combined deterrent power and defensive strength is most important.
Due to the instability on the Korean peninsula and referring to North Korea's landmine provocation at the demilitarized zone last month, Denmark also agreed on building a strong South Korea-U.S. alliance.
These provocations are another reminder of how dangerous things can be here in the Korean peninsula, and how a highly ready force in support of a very strong ally is absolutely necessary to keep the peace.
The timing of the annual defense meeting is significant as speculation grows that North Korea might launch a long-range rocket next month to commemorate the founding of the ruling Workers' Party. And this is why Seoul and Washington will discuss the 4D strategy that urges the allies to detect, defend, disrupt, and destroy North Korean ballistic missile threats during the talks. Seoul's defense ministry says that during the two-day meeting, Seoul and Washington will also discuss the agreed transfer of wartime operational control of South Korean forces and fine-tune the details of the security consultative meeting scheduled for November. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
South Korea's military plans to install 200 thermal surveillance cameras at 63 key border guard posts to better detect North Korean troops crossing the demilitarized zone. An Army report submitted during a parliamentary audit on Wednesday indicates the military revised its supplementary budget for this year to acquire the cameras for just over $7.2 million. The cameras are expected to be fully installed by the end of this year. A heated televised debate on how to reform Korea's rigid labor market was held on Wednesday between two rival party lawmakers who head their respective labor reform committees. Our Ji Myung-gil reports.
Lee In-jae, who heads the Saenuri Party's Labor Reform Committee, began the debate by praising the September 13th tripartite deal between labor management and the government.
The Grand Compromise is a historic agreement. The tripartite agreement will help overcome social and economic crisis at a time when the Korean economy is struggling.
However, Choo Mi-ae, who chairs the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy Labor Reform Committee, says the deal violates the Constitution.
The agreement violates Korea's constitutional order. Such administrative procedures go against the principle of a constitutional state. Also, it cannot be a grand compromise when only one umbrella union participated.
The Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, one of Korea's two labor groups, neither participated in nor signed the deal. Instead, they insisted the government was trying to implement changes that would worsen labor market conditions and hurt people's livelihoods. At the heart of the heated debate was a trilateral commission's deal that would allow companies to easily fire negligent or underperforming workers.
The opposition is saying the agreement will easily allow the layoff of workers, but that's not true. We are working on the administrative procedures to prevent unfair dismissals of employees from their work.
Korea does not have an objective assessment system to evaluate workers. If we allow companies to easily lay off workers, then employees who are unable to go along with their superiors or women who come back from maternity leave could be targeted.
Chu said easily dismissing workers and extending the employment period of temporary workers was not the essence of labor reforms, as it would only instigate job instability. He stressed that it was now time for the National Assembly to do its part in legislating bills, while Chu emphasized that talks have just begun. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
And at the National Assembly, discussions continue for redrawing constituency boundaries for next year's general elections. Our Park Ji-won has the details.
In March, the National Assembly formed a special committee to determine how to redraw the nation's electoral boundaries. It has become one of the parliament's central topics, as the Constitutional Court ruled last year that the nation's electoral district should be redrawn to address the unequal representation of votes due to population differences in each constituency. Rebel parties have so far agreed to maintain the total number of lawmakers at the current 300, but the two parties have yet to agree on how many of these should be allocated to proportional representatives and how many to local representatives. Currently, 54 seats are being given for proportional representatives, and the remaining 246 seats are for local representatives. The ruling Saenuri Party wants the number of local representatives increased, saying a simple attempt to equalize population representation among constituencies could be harmful to agricultural and fisheries communities, as they tend to have smaller populations.
Our party believes that the number of local representatives should not be cut, especially those of farming and fishing communities, to overcome many problems that those communities are facing.
But the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy wants the number of proportional seats to at least remain the same, even at the expense of cutting the number of local representatives. They believe reducing the number of local representatives could help mitigate the nation's chronic regionalism.
We need to question ourselves whether important values like balancing national development and addressing agricultural communities' problems could be only protected by the number of lawmakers.
The National Election Commission has recommended the Parliament decide the number of local representatives within a range of 244 to 249. If the Assembly fails to come up with an agreement by mid-October, the Commission plans to submit its own redrawing plan to meet the legal deadline for the submission of plans. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
It was straight to business for Chinese President Xi Jinping as he started his U.S. trip in Seattle to meet with business leaders there. President Xi stressed that Chinese economy is growing at a reasonable rate and that China is willing to cooperate with the U.S. and the international community on outstanding issues like cyber crimes. Our Song Ji-sun reports.
Upon his arrival in the U.S., Chinese President Xi Jinping reassured them that China will maintain stable growth and that its economy is within reasonable range. He said its stock market has recovered after suffering a period of severe volatility, and that given the complex and volatile global economic environment, such turmoil was expected. Xi also stressed that as Beijing is opposed to a currency war, it will not devalue its currency to boost exports, and it remains committed to financial reforms and an open economy. He also pledged to cooperate with the U.S. against cybercrime, an issue likely to be discussed during summit talks with his U.S. counterpart, Barack Obama, on Friday. Washington has been saying that Chinese spying is putting a strain on bilateral relations. The two sides will also seek ways to enhance cooperation towards denuclearizing Pyongyang. Territorial tensions in the South China Sea may also be on the table. Xi is also scheduled to fly to New York for his first speech to the UN General Assembly since taking office. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
After weeks of indecision, EU interior ministers have approved a plan to manage the influx of refugees crossing its borders. Our Oh Soo-young has the details.
Following the massive influx of migrants into the European Union this year, the EU has passed a quota system to allocate 120,000 migrants across its 28 states. The decision came on Tuesday as EU interior ministers met in Brussels to discuss how to ease the burden on migrant transit countries.
We have a deal. We have decided today to distribute 120,000 asylum seekers, particularly from Italy and Greece, among European member states. Germany will also participate to the extent of around 30,000 people.
Under the plan, 50,400 refugees will be moved from Greece to other countries and 15,600 from Italy. However, the deal has met fierce opposition from 4 eastern nations: Hungary, Slovakia, Romania and the Czech Republic. These countries are concerned the measures may encourage more asylum seekers to move into their regional bloc. With Hungary shunning the relocation plan, the remaining migrants who are supposed to be moved from the country will instead be moved from Italy and Greece. With the scheme being passed by a majority rather than a unanimous vote, this rift between Eastern and Western member states is sparking criticism about the regional bloc's lack of solidarity. Meanwhile, with the inflow of migrants continuing to grow, it is said to be Europe's worst refugee crisis since World War II. EU leaders will meet again on Wednesday to discuss further on how to handle the escalating crisis. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Turning now to the massive fallout from Volkswagen's diesel emissions fraud, the automaker has now admitted that 11 million of its vehicles were fitted with a software to help it cheat U.S. pollution tests. With the value of Volkswagen shares plummeting yet again on Tuesday, one of the world's most famous brands is facing an uncertain future. Son Jang-in reports.
It was initially thought that some 500,000 diesel vehicles would be recalled, not because of faulty components, but for the illegal installation of software to cheat on emission standards tests. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's figure has snowballed in a matter of days. After carrying out its own investigation, Volkswagen has confirmed that over 11 million cars sold worldwide were equipped with the so-called defeat device. The German automaker says it's setting aside more than $7.2 billion to cover the fallout. Despite the growing scandal, Volkswagen's CEO has given no indication he might resign. Instead, he apologized for the deception and pledged a fast and thorough investigation.
I am endlessly sorry that we betrayed the trust. I apologize profusely to our clients, to the authorities, and the entire public for the wrongdoing.
But this could just be the beginning for the world's largest automaker. When the U.S. wraps up its probe, Volkswagen is likely to face up to $18 billion in penalties for misleading U.S. regulators. And as the recall has expanded to other countries around the world, the amount of compensation is expected to reach astronomical figures. Plus, class action lawsuits from customers and investors also seem unavoidable. The worrisome development has even prompted the German leader herself to step up to settle the issue.
The transport minister, together with Germany's Central Car Registration Agency, is conducting the necessary discussions. This is the only way to achieve transparency.
Having lost 35% of its share price in just 2 trading days since the controversy broke out, the crisis has already cost Volkswagen more than $26 billion in market value. Son Jang-in, Arirang News.
An American citizen accused of murdering a Korean student 18 years ago has returned to Korea to stand trial. He denies the killing. Our Kwon Jang-ho has more.
Dressed in white and looking visibly tired, Arthur Patterson returned to Korea after 16 years on Wednesday to face trial for the murder of a Korean university student. The murder occurred on April 3, 1997, in the bathroom of a Burger King outlet in Itaewon. The victim was stabbed 9 times with a pocket knife Patterson had been carrying. 2 suspects, Patterson and his friend Edward Lee, were at the scene, both claiming the other had carried out the stabbing. Lee was initially found guilty of the murder, but was later acquitted by the Supreme Court, citing a lack of evidence. Patterson was to be investigated further, but a prosecutor mistakenly failed to renew his overseas travel ban, allowing him to return to the US. Patterson was born to a Korean mother, and his father was a civilian worker for the US military. The case sparked a wave of hostile public sentiment towards American forces in Korea. The case went cold for 10 years, until a film in 2009 reignited public interest and anger. After prosecutors reopened the case, Patterson was indicted in 2011. Since then, he continually fought extradition, and now, having lost that battle in May, finds himself back on Korean soil. Although he has shown sympathy for the victim's family, he maintains his innocence.
The family of the victims, it's not right that they have to keep going through this pain over and over and over, but it's not right that I'm here either. I'm still shocked that I'm even here, that's all.
A major step has been taken for this case, but after such a long time, it remains open as whether the answers to his questions of guilt will be found. Kwon Jang-ho, Arirang News.
And that brings us to the end of our newscast. More updates coming up at 10 p.m. Korea time, so stay tuned and goodbye for now.